Hi everyone, today's ERQ is evaluate two research methods used in the study of brain and behavior in the biological approach. So that means first you need to evaluate. This command term evaluate means you need to write the strengths and the weaknesses of what? Let's go back to the question on research methods. So that means you need to write two studies from biological approach and whatever research methods have been used in these studies, you need to evaluate and write the strengths and weaknesses of these research methods that are used in the study. I hope you understood. Let's start writing the ERQ. Here is the ready-made answer for you. See how to write and what to write in this ERQ. Let's start. So the first, as we always do, is the introduction that carries 2 marks. So this is what you need to write. The biological approach investigates the biological explanation of human behavior. This considers genetics, the development of the brain, and how the brain governs human behavior. A large variety of research methods can be employed in order to learn more about genetics and the brain. However, I will be focusing on and evaluating the use of case studies as well as the use of quasi-experiments. Now, you must have noticed here in the introduction, I have already mentioned that which two research methods I will be talking about in my ERQ, that is case studies and quasi-experiments. So let's start our second paragraph where I am going to talk about the study that I am going to use, supporting study, and also mention in the second paragraph along with the study that focusing on that which research method you have chosen and how that research method is linked with that study. So this is how we write a second paragraph. Case studies play an important role in the biological approach. Two famous studies are the studies of HM and EP. The former of the two is one of the main reasons why we know as much as we do about memory today. HM was in a car accident at the age of 7 and sustained a head injury that resulted in epileptic seizures. At the age of 27, he underwent an experimental surgery that included the removal of the hippocampus. After the surgery, HM developed retrograde amnesia, meaning he would not be able to retain any memory past a span of a few minutes to a few seconds. Miller carried out a case study that involved method triangulation in order to understand more about the lasting effects of HM surgery. This case study drew conclusions such as the hippocampus plays a significant role in converting to short-term memory to long-term memory, and that different types of memory such as procedural and emotional memory are stored in different parts of the brain. By using case studies of atypical subjects, we can understand the brain's anatomy and physiological functions in new ways. Case studies allow us to study situations we could never create in a laboratory. Case studies unfortunately have limitations as well. The case study by nature is the study of one rare case, therefore making it less reliable, and it is unlikely generalizable. We cannot recreate the study of HM because we cannot ethically recreate his situation. Now, in the second paragraph, you saw that I gave the supporting study and I also linked it with the research method, that is with the case study, and I also gave the strength as well as the weakness, that is evaluated the case study, the use of case study. Now comes the third paragraph. One research method that is not commonly used within the scope of biological approach is the quasi-experiment or natural experiment. A quasi-experiment does not randomly allocate participants to conditions and investigates the influence of a naturally occurring independent variable on the participants. An example of a quasi-experiment would be Maguire's experiment on taxi drivers. The experiment was to observe whether there was an anatomical difference between the brains of London taxi drivers and an average person. The study was a single-blind study in order to control for researcher bias. The study showed that the posterior hippocampi of the taxi drivers was much larger than of those who were not taxi drivers due to extensive training and experience. The size of the hippocampus had a significant positive correlation with time spent as a taxi driver. This relates to the concept of neuroplasticity. However, the non-random allocation to a condition means that the results cannot be considered valid and the study cannot be reliably replicated. A quasi-experiment contains too many random confounding variables. So here we wrote the second supporting study and also linked it with the quasi experiment that was used in this supporting study. I, as per the demand of the question, also evaluated, that is, wrote down the strengths and weaknesses of the quasi experiment. Now comes our last paragraph, that is the conclusion, which again is of 2 marks, and this is what we need to write. The biological approach favors more controlled research methods that can find biological explanations for why humans behave the way they do. Quasi-experiments are less controlled and less precise research methods. This is the opposite of case studies, which are generally very controlled and can lead to revolutionary research through the study of unique cases. However, these two research methods in combination can yield very productive results. So you saw that in conclusion, I just took the gist of both case study and the quasi experiments. I just concluded the whole thing and gave it in my conclusion, stating the overall impact of these two research methods. So here we are done with the ERQ. I hope you understood and how to write, what to write in this answer. If you have any queries, please feel free to write in the comment section below, and don't forget to subscribe, because here you get all IB psychology material.